When I stop and think about how many steps this side-by-side has saved me, or how much backbreaking labor this tractor has saved me, it's hard not to appreciate the conveniences of modern machines. And it's hard not to acknowledge the fact that it is because of these machines that I'm able to manage the amount of land and animals that I do as a one-man show. But like most farmers and ranchers, I have a soft spot and quite honestly a fascination with the old equipment as well. That's what we're talking about today on Farmer Tyler Ranch. Now, I certainly can't deny the fact that my New Holland has over twice as much power as the old Jubilee. It's got four-wheel drive, so it pulls a lot harder. The lights are brighter. The turbo diesel runs flawlessly. And I mean, really, this is a nice tractor. But if I'm backed into a corner and I have to tell you which one I like more, or I guess a different way of looking at it is, which tractor am I still going to own in another 50 years? It's definitely going to be the Jubilee. Now, if Mrs. FTR were here, she would say that in another 50 years, I'll still own both of these tractors because I don't really get rid of anything. And that very well could be true. So I guess we'll say more accurately that in 50 years, I'll definitely own the Jubilee and I might still own the New Holland. If you guys have been with the channel for a while, then you know that this tractor has a lot of sentimental value to me. And that is part of the reason why I think I like it so much. But it's more than just that. I like the way that the sheet metal is formed. I like the fact that it's, even though it's small, it's heavy. And maybe above all else, the fact that it has virtually no plastic on it, unless it's like modern parts that I added, like the alternator there. These old tractors are just a bunch of metal and rubber put together into a machine that was built to last. Now, with all that being said, I'm really not trying to convince you that old equipment is better or new equipment is better. It's really not the point of this video. All I really want to do today is just sort of take a minute to appreciate this old stuff and kind of take note of how far equipment has come over the years. Now, with that in mind, there is something else that I want to show you guys that has not ever made it onto my channel yet, and that is in the neighbor's bone pile up the road. He's got like 2 or 3 really old combines. I'm not really sure what era they're from, but I would guess the 40s or the 50s. I was looking at them the other day and just really impressed at how different things were back then as opposed to how things are now. So I thought it would be a good idea to jump in the side-by-side, take the cameras down there and show you guys what I'm talking about. While I was driving out to the neighbor's bone pile, I saw this big John Deere sitting here, and that kind of falls right in line with what we're talking about today. Back in the 50s, if guys wanted to work ground, they probably would have done it on a tractor very similar to my little Jubilee. And now they want to work ground, they ride one of these mammoth four-wheel drive, high horsepower tractors. These things are pretty amazing. I wish that I could get closer to it, but unfortunately there is a canal in between me and the tractor. Well, here we are down at the neighbor's bone pile. I was right, there are 3 of them down here. Now the sun's getting kind of low, so it's going to be really hard to film on the other side of them because it's just going to kind of blind you. But fortunately, these all 3 look relatively the same, although one of them is probably more complete than the other 2. But A couple of them are parked pointing that way, and then the other one is parked pointing this way, so we should be able to get a pretty good look at everything that's going on here. So what we have here are Massey Harris, I don't know how well the camera is going to show this, but it's 90 SP Rice Special. I did not know that they made Rice Specials that were this old, but apparently they did, because there's one right here. I think that this machine in the middle here is more complete than the other two. I don't know if it's newer. I really can't tell if these are different model years or not. But this one seems to have most of the parts, at least most of the ones that I can identify. Whereas the other two, I'm wondering if maybe they were used as parts machines to kind of keep this one going. I'm not really sure. I want to try to get back in here to kind of show you how these are configured, because they're actually a lot different than a modern machine. On a modern combine or harvester, you have your header out in front of you. The feeder house draws all that material underneath the operator into the separator and then out the back of the machine. So it's kind of all an inline process. You can see that the header is a little bit offset from where the operator sits. And the feeder house, which is this piece right here, is also offset on the side. So basically, the whole machine is kind of offset, or I guess a better way of looking at that is that the operator is offset from the whole machine. Now, not surprisingly, these old harvesters ran on tracks. You see, way back in the day when they were using these things, it was really uncommon to harvest rice on dry ground. In fact, it was really expected that you were going to be harvesting in the mud. So that's why you'll see all these old machines have tracks on them. Now, something that I really wasn't expecting to see on this was this, what looks like a manual transmission gear shift, and it's running the header. And all that I can figure is that as crop conditions change in a modern machine, you would adjust the speed of the reel to match that. Now, on a modern machine, you do all that with a push of a button, but when this thing was doing its work in the field, they didn't have that luxury. So what I am thinking is that they use this transmission to change the speed of the reel. Now, I don't know what sort of wasps or critters have made a home in this old combine, but I just can't help myself. I'm gonna have to climb up into that driver's seat and see what it was like to run one of these things way back when. Climb up here without killing myself. Oh, wow. So that I would not have expected. Well, when I climbed up here, I didn't really know what to expect, but what I'm looking at right now is definitely not something that I thought I would see. Back behind this seat, you guys can see this pile of white stuff, and what that is those are coyote droppings. So for whatever reason, and I have no idea why, the coyotes decided that climbing up here on top of this harvester and doing their business behind the seat is the thing that they wanted to do. Now, I get that they want to mark territory and all that, but why do that in such an inconvenient location is beyond me. I really want to try kind of sitting in this seat here, but there isn't really nothing to sit on. I guess we got clutch and brake and just kind of like you'd expect. As I kind of look down here, I'm pretty sure there's a wasp nest in that steering column, so I'm going to get out of there. This is actually really cool up here because everything that I would expect to see on a modern machine is here. It's just a lot smaller, and I mean, everything is mechanical. Obviously, the only electrical things we're going to see would be these lights, and that's probably about it. We've got the reel, although it is kind of falling apart, it is there. Our sickle bar cutter coming up into our feeder house here, and our rotor that actually looks a lot like a modern rotor, just a little bit smaller. From there, the rice would have gone into the separator, and then the grain itself would end up going back into this tank. Once the tank got full, you would use your fill spout to unload into the bank out wagon. All of these parts exist on modern machinery. They've just sort of been refined and improved. And probably the biggest change is that everything on a new machine is so much bigger. This header, I'm guessing just by looking at it, is probably about 14 feet wide. That's the same width as the swather that I use to cut hay. A modern combine has a header anywhere from 25 to over 30 feet wide. That's a pretty big difference. The overall size of this machine is so much smaller than normal too. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but man, just to look at how little this thing is, this could almost fit inside the grain tank of a modern machine. Sometimes on these old machines, it's not what you see that's so impressive, but more what you don't see. Specifically in this case, I'm talking about the total lack of a cab enclosure. Now, if you've never run a combine, you may not realize this, and if you have ever run a combine, you definitely know it. But this is about one of the dustiest, itchiest, dirtiest jobs that I could imagine. I would never want to operate one of these without an enclosed cab, because as that reel spins around, it's just throwing up dust and junk at you all day long. I feel really sorry for the guy that had to run this. Also, looking at this this gauge cluster here, it's kind of surprising. The amp meter is actually still really readable, and I mean, it actually looks pretty good. After looking at these three machines a little bit more closely, they are in fact different, although they're all Massey Harris 90 SP rice specials. So I'm guessing that they're probably just from different eras. But yeah, let's take a look in the back end of this thing. And again, crazy enough, there's a bunch of coyote drop-ins in here. Now, I don't know what makes them want to get up in there and do that. Marking territory or something. But anyway, so this is where the screens would be. They're not here anymore, but you can see the tray or the racks where the screens would rest. And if we look up here on these wobble arms, they're actually using wooden bearings. Now that's just something you don't see anymore, but back in the day, I guess that was pretty common. Now on this one, there's not a whole lot left of this rear end, but we can kind of see what's going on. So it's actually really narrow. I'd say from where one tire was here to where the other one would have been is about right here. This is probably only maybe 40 inches wide, just a little bit over 3 feet. I'm guessing that this was on tracks because, like I said before, you know, they always harvested in the mud. So probably what you would do when you wanted to turn this thing is you probably had a clutch for one side, just like on a cat, and you would lose all your power on one, let's say on your right side, if you were wanting to make a right turn. So your left track would continue pushing you that direction, and then you would use the steering wheel to kind of swing your back end around. Now this I saw and it just kind of made me laugh. Look at that pipe going up next to the feeder house there, and on top of that you see that paint can. What that is, that's the air intake, and they put that can on there to keep water out of it. And it's just kind of funny looking at the machine now, you know, we sure wouldn't want any water getting in there. After giving these machines a thorough look over, it is actually really hard to believe that there was a time when this was the state of the art of combine technology. I kind of laugh about it now, but as little and as simple as these machines are, I'm thinking that back in the day, the guys thought they were a heck of a lot better than doing it by hand. Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys, and I hope I'll see you again on Farmer Tyler Ranch.